Agents of pollination. Pollination means transfer of pollen grain from anther to the stigma of an flower. And for this transfer of pollen grains, agents are required. There are two types of agent: abiotic agent, that is non-living, and biotic agent, which are living. Abiotic agent include wind and water. When pollination is done by wind, it is anemophily. Most of the important crop plants are wind pollinated. This includes wheat, rice, corn, rye, barley and oats. Palms are also wind pollinated. So this plant has adaptation for wind pollination. These plants are called as anemophilous plant and the flowers are called as anemophilous flower. So let's see the adaptation. The flowers are small, inconspicuous, colorless, without nectar and fragrance. The pollen grains are light in weight, dry and produce in large number to increase chances of pollination considering wastage of pollen grain. Stigma is feathery to trap pollens carried by wind current. Stamens are exerted with long filament and versatile anther. They swing in air when the wind blows to release pollen grains. Stamen and stigmas are exposed to air currents. So these are the adaptations of anemophilous flower. When pollination is done by water, it is hydrophily. It is found in some 30 genera of aquatic monocots. Example is Vallisneria, Zoostera and Chiropterophilous. Adaptation in hydrophilous flower. Flowers are small and inconspicuous. Perianth and other floral parts are unvetable. Pollen grains are long and unvetable due to presence of mucilage. Nectar and fragrance are lacking in flower. Hydrophily is of two types: hypohydrophily and epihydrophily. When pollination occurs below the surface of water, it is hypohydrophily. The pollen grains are heavier than water and that's why they sink down and caught by stigma of female flower. Example, Zoostera, that is seagrass. Pollen grains are long, ribbon-like and without exine. In hypohydrophily, example is Zoostera and Chiropterophilous. Epihydrophily, when pollination takes place on the water surface, it is epihydrophily. The pollen grains float on the water surface and reach the stigma of female flower. Example is Vallisneria. Vallisneria is a submerged dioecious freshwater aquatic plant in which female flowers reach the water surface temporarily to ensure pollination and male flowers float on the surface of water. Specific gravity of pollen grain is equal to that of water and that is why they float on the water surface. Exception: there are some aquatic plants which are anemophilous. Means here pollination is done by air. So in spite of being aquatic plants, pollination is not done by water, it is done by air. So they are anemophilous. Example is Potamogeton and Halogaris. And there are some other aquatic plants in which pollination is done by insect. They are Entomophilous. Example is lotus, water hyacinth, that is Eichhornia, and water lily. So here, instead of being aquatic plant, in Potamogeton and Halogaris, pollination is done by wind, and in lotus, water hyacinth, that is Eichhornia, and water lily, pollination is done by insect. Biotic agents, this include living agents like insect, birds and bats. About 80% of plant requires the help of other living, moving creatures like insect, birds, bats, snail to transfer their pollens from one flower to another. When pollination is done by insect, it is entomophily, and this occurs in rose, jasmine and castrum. Adaptations in entomophilous flower, they are large, showy and often brightly colored. They are attractive. The flower produce sweet odor, fragrance and have nectar glands. Stigma is rough due to presence of hair or a sticky due to mucilaginous secretion. The pollen grains are spiny and surrounded by a yellow sticky substance called pollen kit. Some plants have special adaptations for the insect visitors to help in cross pollination. Example is lever mechanism or turnpike mechanism in salvia. When pollination is done by birds, it is ornithophily. Only few types of birds are specialized for pollination. They usually have small size and long beak. Example is sunbird and hummingbird. And some ornithophilous plants are bombyx, callistemon, that is bottle brush, and bootia. So remember 3BQ. B stands for bombyx, B stands for bottle brush, that is callistemon, and B stands for bootia. Adaptation in ornithophilous flower. Flowers are usually brightly colored, large and showy. They secrete profuse dilute nectar. Pollen grains are sticky and spiny. Flowers are generally without fragrance as birds have poor sense of smell. When pollination is done by bats, it is Chiropterophily. Bats can transport pollens over long distance, sometimes several kilometers. Adaptation in Chiropterophilous flower. Flowers are dull color with strong fragrance. They secrete abundant nectar. Flower produce large amount of edible pollen grains. Example is Entomophilous kadam tree, Adansonia, bobek tree, Kigelia, Sosak tree. So this was all about agents of pollination.